before he became the architect of the rule of two, before he reshaped the Sith into the form we recognize in the films. He was simply a man named Dessel. Darth Bane did not begin his life as a philosopher of the dark side, nor as a visionary seeking to redefine an ancient order. He was born on the outer rim world of Apatros, a harsh, unforgiving environment where survival was not a lesson, but a necessity. Dessel's early life was shaped by brutality. Raised in poverty, abused by his father, and forced into the grueling labor of Cortosis mines, he developed a worldview grounded in one fundamental principle: strength is survival, weakness is death. This mindset would later become the foundation of everything he believed about the Sith. When he was eventually conscripted into the Sith military during the New Sith Wars, Dessel quickly distinguished himself, not through loyalty but through raw ability, aggression, and an instinctive understanding of power dynamics. His rise through the ranks was not the result of ideology, but of pragmatism. He did what was necessary to win. Nothing more, nothing less. It was during this time that his potential in the Force was recognized, leading him to the Sith Academy on Korriban, a place steeped in the legacy of the ancient Sith Lords. Here, Dessel would be given a new name, a new identity. He became Darth Bane. But what he encountered on Korriban, and later within the broader Sith Order under Skere Kaan, did not inspire loyalty. It inspired contempt, because the Sith he found were not the embodiment of strength he had envisioned. They were many. They were divided. And in Bane's eyes, they were weak. Transition to next section. What Bane saw in the Brotherhood of Darkness was not the continuation of the ancient Sith legacy, but its degeneration. And from that realization, a radical idea began to take shape. One that would lead him to do the unthinkable, to destroy not just his enemies, but his own order. To understand the magnitude of what Darth Bane ultimately did, we must first recognize what the Brotherhood of Darkness actually was. Under the leadership of Skere Kaan, the Brotherhood represented the final surviving lineage of the ancient Sith Order. This was not a scattered group of renegades. This was the culmination of Sith tradition following the collapse of earlier empires. An order that preserved Sith teachings, hierarchies, and philosophies across generations of war. Though altered and adapted over time, the Brotherhood still carried forward the legacy of figures such as Naga, Sadow, and Marka Ragnos. It was, in essence, the last organized continuation of the Sith as they had existed for millennia. But it was also different. Kaan had restructured the Sith into a collective. Gone was the singular dominance of a Dark Lord above all others. In its place, he established a system of equality among Sith Lords, where power was distributed rather than centralized. The Brotherhood functioned less like a hierarchy of domination, and more like a coalition. At first glance, this may appear stable, even progressive, but to Bane it was an abomination, because in removing internal conflict, Kaan had also removed the very mechanism that the Sith relied upon to refine strength. The ancient Sith were not unified. They were competitive, ruthless, self-evolving through betrayal and ambition. Power was not shared. It was taken. And through that process, the strongest rose while the weak were eliminated. Kaan's Brotherhood, by contrast, protected the weak. It enforced cooperation. It diluted power across many individuals rather than concentrating it in the hands of the most capable. To Bane, this was not strength. It was stagnation. This was the final turning point for Bane. Bane did not believe he was destroying the Sith. He believed the Sith were already lost. In his view, the Brotherhood of Darkness was not the true continuation of the ancient Sith. It was a corrupted remnant. A system that had abandoned the core principles that once made the Sith powerful. Where the ancient Sith embraced conflict, the Brotherhood suppressed it. Where the ancient Sith pursued dominance, the Brotherhood enforced equality. Where the ancient Sith thrived through hierarchy, the Brotherhood dissolved it. To Bane, this was not evolution. It was decay disguised as unity. And this is where his philosophy begins to crystallize. The Sith, he concluded, were not meant to exist as many. Because the presence of many Sith inevitably led to infighting that weakened the order externally. alliances that protected mediocrity, and a dilution of true power. Thus, Bane arrives at his most radical conclusion. The Sith must be reduced to be perfected. From this belief emerges the foundation of what would become the rule of two. Two Sith, no more, no less. One to embody power, one to crave it. At face value, this appears as a refinement of Sith ideology. But when viewed in context, it represents something far more drastic. A complete reconstruction of the Sith identity, because Bane does not merely reduce the number of Sith, he redefines what it means to be Sith. The ancient Sith were an order, a civilization, at times even an empire. Bane's Sith are something else entirely. Hidden, selective, focused not on immediate dominance, but on long-term infiltration and control. This is no longer a traditional order. It is closer to a doctrine. A lineage bound not by structure, but by ideology and succession. In this sense, one could argue that Bane did not preserve the Sith. He transformed them into something new. A cult of the dark side, centered on secrecy, patience, and the concentration of power into a single lineage. As Darth Bane prepared to bring about the destruction of the Brotherhood of Darkness, he did not see himself as a traitor to the Sith. He saw himself as their fulfillment. Within ancient Sith prophecy exists the concept of the Sith'ari, a being who would destroy the Sith and in doing so, make them stronger than ever before. To Bane, this was not metaphor. It was identity. He believed that by annihilating the Brotherhood under Skere Kaan, he was purging weakness from the Order. That by reducing the Sith to a single, perfected lineage, he would restore their lost greatness. And in a literal sense, he succeeded. The Brotherhood of Darkness, the last organized remnant of the ancient Sith tradition, was wiped out. With it vanished the final living continuation of a lineage that traced back to the original Sith empires. But this is where the deeper contradiction emerges, because while Bane believed he was restoring the Sith, from the perspective of the ancient Sith themselves, his actions could be seen as something far more destructive. A perversion. The Sith of old, figures such as Naga, Sadow, Marka, Ragnos, and their successors, were not merely survivors operating in secrecy. They were conquerors, empire builders, warlords who reshaped the galaxy through force. Their power was not hidden. It was demonstrated. Their philosophy was not rooted in patience or concealment. It was rooted in domination. The Sith did not wait in the shadows. They rose openly, challenged the Jedi directly, and sought to impose their will on a galactic scale. In this context, Bane's transformation of the Sith represents a fundamental shift, not just in strategy but in identity. Because under Bane's rule of two, the Sith ceased to be warriors leading armies, and become architects behind the curtain, manipulators, politicians, strategists playing a long game rather than seizing immediate power. To the ancient Sith, this would not necessarily appear as evolution. It would appear as diminishment. There is an irony at the heart of Bane's philosophy. He believed he was eliminating weakness by enforcing survival of the fittest within a controlled lineage. But in doing so, he redefined the Sith from a culture of expansion into a system of survival. The ancient Sith thrived in conflict, but they did so as dominant forces. Bane's Sith avoided open conflict whenever possible. They operated in secrecy, carefully positioning themselves over generations. They did not conquer the galaxy through war. They inherited it through manipulation. And while this strategy ultimately led to the rise of Darth Sidious, arguably the most politically successful Sith in history, it came at a cost. The Sith were no longer an order. They were a hidden lineage, no longer a civilization, but a chain of succession. Thus, from the perspective of the ancient Sith, Bane and his successors may not be seen as the true heirs of their legacy, but as something else entirely, a reinterpretation, a narrowing of what it means to be Sith. Where once the Sith embodied conquest, domination, and visible power, Bane's lineage embodies patience, control, and invisibility. He may have believed himself to be the Sith'ari, the one who would destroy and remake the Sith, but in the eyes of the ancients, that was simply not true. However, when we re-examine the prophecy of the Sith'ari through a broader historical lens, a compelling argument emerges. Darth Bane was not its fulfillment. He was only the beginning of it. Because while Bane did indeed destroy the Sith and remake them, what he created was not a restoration of the ancient order, but a reduction of it. A narrowing. A survival-based doctrine that stripped the Sith of their original identity as conquerors and empire builders. In contrast, there exists another figure in Star Wars legends who fulfills the prophecy far more completely. Darth Krayt. Unlike Bane, whose understanding of the Sith came from fragmented teachings and holocrons, Krayt's connection to the ancient Sith runs far deeper. He was trained through the teachings of Zozan, one of the founders of the Sith Order itself, a dark Jedi exile who helped shape the very origins of Sith philosophy. This is a crucial distinction. Bane inherited the Sith tradition. Krayt was directly linked to its source. Where Bane reconstructed, Krayt reconnected. More importantly, Krayt did what Bane never could. He rejected the rule of two entirely. In its place, he established the rule of one, a system in which there was one Dark Lord, but many Sith serving a unified purpose. This was not a return to the Brotherhood of Darkness, nor was it a continuation of Bane's ideology. It was something closer to the ancient Sith model, where a single dominant Dark Lord ruled, multiple Sith operated beneath him, and the Order functioned as a collective force of conquest. Krayt himself even declared that he had recreated the Sith, directly challenging Bane's legacy. And here is where the prophecy aligns more cleanly with Krayt than with Bane. The Sith'ari is said to destroy the Sith and remake them stronger than before. Bane fulfilled the first half, but Krayt fulfills both, because Krayt cast aside Bane's system, unified the Sith into a singular purpose, rebuilt them into a functioning order capable of ruling the galaxy again, and restored their identity as an active, dominant force, not a hidden lineage. Even Bane's own holocron regarded Krayt's order as heretical, a rejection of his teachings. And that is precisely the point. A true Sith'ari would not preserve the past. He would break it. In many ways, Krayt represents a return, not to the Brotherhood of Darkness, but to something even older. A synthesis of ancient Sith structure, centralized authority, and unified purpose. While the ancient Sith were fractured by ambition, Krayt sought to eliminate that weakness through enforced loyalty, creating an order that could function at scale without collapsing inward. It was not perfect, but it was closer to the original vision of Sith dominance than anything Bane created. Thus, the irony becomes undeniable. Darth Bane believed himself to be the Sith'ari, the one who would destroy and remake the Sith. But in doing so, he created a system that abandoned their original nature. It would take Darth Krayt, a figure trained in the knowledge of the first Sith Lords themselves, to finally undo Bane's legacy and restore the Sith to something resembling their ancient form. Not as survivors, not as shadows, but once again, as an order. In the end, the story of Darth Bane is not one of simple restoration. It is one of radical transformation. Bane believed he was saving the Sith. He believed the Brotherhood of Darkness, under Skere Kaan, represented weakness, dilution, and decay. And in many ways he was not entirely wrong. The Brotherhood had indeed strayed from the brutal, competitive nature that once defined the ancient Sith. But in destroying them, Bane did more than eliminate a flawed system. He erased the last true lineage of the original Sith Order. What replaced it was not a continuation, but a reinvention. A doctrine built on secrecy, patience, and survival. One that transformed the Sith from conquerors into manipulators, from empire builders into hidden architects operating behind the veil of galactic politics. And while this new system ultimately led to the rise of Darth Sidious, the most politically successful Sith in history, it came at the cost of the Sith's original identity. They no longer ruled through visible strength. They ruled through invisible control. Thus, Bane's claim, implicit or explicit, to be the Sith'ari becomes deeply questionable. Because the Sith'ari is not merely one who destroys. He is one who destroys and perfects. And Bane, for all his vision, did not restore the Sith to their former nature. He reduced them to a single line of succession. It would take Darth Krayt to complete what Bane began. By abolishing the rule of two and establishing the rule of one, Krayt did what Bane could not. He reconstructed the Sith as an order once more. Not a fractured brotherhood, but a unified force under a single will. Not a hidden lineage, but a resurgent power capable of open domination. In doing so, Krayt aligns far more closely with the spirit of the ancient Sith. A return to centralized authority, collective strength, and visible supremacy. Where Bane reshaped the Sith into survivors, Krayt reshaped them back into rulers. And in that distinction lies the ultimate irony. Bane believed he was the end of weakness, the purifier of the Sith, the Sith'ari. But from a broader perspective, he may instead be seen as a transitional figure, the one who destroyed the old Sith but did not fully restore them. That role belongs to Krayt, because the true fulfillment of the Sith'ari prophecy is not simply destruction. It is destruction followed by restoration. And only one of them achieved both. If you found this analysis insightful, consider supporting the channel with a like and subscribing for more deep dives into Star Wars Legends lore. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Was Darth Bane truly the savior of the Sith? Or did Darth Krayt ultimately fulfill what Bane only began? Your perspective matters, and discussions like these are what keep the lore alive. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.